Since you're not here in person, I'll walk you through the process. All the corn we bring in comes from within, almost all of it comes within 30 miles. There's a few outside of that. Very high percentage comes in within 10 miles, just out of convenience. The closer they are to here, the easier we are to deliver here versus somebody else. And as you get farther away, they become closer to someone else. So we have hundreds of producers though that sell us their corn, and again, we bring in about 25 million bushels or close to every year. What we're watching now is inbound corn delivery. So there's 2 compartments in this truck. So we will probe both compartments to test for quality. So that's a vacuum hose going in, and you can hear the sound of the kernels going through the tubes and the pipes being vacuumed back into the office. So that once we have our sample, the truck is clear to go. And we're testing it over here. So Amanda's going to have to slow down for us. So here's the sample we just pulled coming in, and you can see the corn. So this looks like new crop coming in. So you can kind of tell by the color and size. So that's a pretty big sample, but we only need a fraction of that. So we get all those three samples are create a composite of that load.
Yep. Then we can run it through the moisture tester and get a test weight.
So this one's right where we want it, 14.4% moisture. So this will be getting full price today, and 58.8 pounds per bushel test weight. And for those overseas, a bushel has 56 pounds for those on the metric system. This bucket is a small sample of all the corn that has been received today. So this will be homogenized, blended, and ground up into a sample. And this is what we test for mycotoxins. The first step is milling into flour. The next step is combining into a slurry. That hum you hear is the mills grinding the corn into flour. And this is where the DDGs are stored, the Dakota Gold, again, this silo, this concrete silo right here. So they're coming from those bins where the corn goes down through the floor when the trucks come in with augers, up into those bins, from those bins, back across conveyors, over to these mills where it's ground into flour and then sent over to the plant for processing and fermentation. So this is the control room. I mentioned the first step was the grinding and the milling of the corn into flour. When it comes into the building, it's introduced in what we call our slurry tank, where the flour is combined with water, enzymes, yeast, and other things to start the fermentation process. So that is blended up and compounded, and then that flour is fermented for 3 to 4 days. After 3 to 4 days, the yeast and enzymes, the enzymes convert the starch into sugars, and then the yeast actually consumes sugar. So once the yeast and enzymes have consumed all the starches that they can easily get to in that amount of time, it then starts processing into distillation, where through boiling and heat, we add or separate the ethanol, the alcohol, from the water and the solids, which are eventually going to be the feed product. From there, it goes, the distillation will get, the alcohol goes out one end, but then that water and solids processes further through centrifuges, where it spins out the water, and then that wet product is dried through dryers, the corn oil is extracted, a number of things happen along that way, but it is all controlled here. And there's a different screens for dryers, for fermentation, for distillation, and a lot of this I can view this at home. They can see this at our Sioux Falls office or any other plant. So if we do have upset conditions or anything else, we can call in help or assistance, and other people can see what we're doing. And it's one of the really neat things is being able to see what's going on the process at any time, whether it be corn oil, slurry, again. And this is all run with 3 people run the plant during most times. So everything is controlled here. The drying process, once it's done, takes only about 10 minutes. once it actually goes through the dryers, it goes very, very quickly. And we use ring dryers rather than rotary dryers, so it's done at a cooler temp, so that the amino acids and some of the other things critical for animal nutrition don't see as much heat. Again, we're trying to preserve as much nutritional value while making on the co-products or byproducts, co-products as we can, while making optimizing alcohol process at the same time. This is our lab where we test all our outgoing products, and that covers everything we sell. We'll focus on the distiller grain side, the feed side. We keep a sample of every truck outbound. So we keep a bag of this in case there are any concerns with product quality, hard to unload, not meeting specifications, etc. We have a retained for third-party testing. So again, I mentioned before that the specs we care about are the color, the moisture content, the protein, and the fat. So we have a record of all of those for every load that we ship out. We have our Dakota Gold is kind of our premium product where for international buyers is what we would be selling. And here's our specifications for that, where moisture is less than 12%, fat between 3.5% and 6.5%, protein at least 28%, and color greater than 48. And so on this one, color's 54, the moisture is 11.7, the protein is 29, and the fat is at 5.4%. So the protein plus fat on this one is over 34, which for nutritionists, that's a big number for a lot of guys. So the other one is the color. We generally, out of here, run in the mid to high 50s. Our minimum is 48, but that's just a good indicator of how cool your dryers are that I talked about. And it's also an indicator of lower sugar, because the sugars will caramelize and create a darker feed product. That's important. Not so much, I don't know how much on the nutrition side, but when you have high sugar, your flowability suffers because sugars are sticky. So that's a good indicator there, and you can see this one is very, very loose. And so even by the time it goes overseas and arrives somewhere, you should have good ability to unload the product. A couple other things to note on the distiller's grains. About 70% of the weight we bring in of the bushel goes into making ethanol. About 30% is what's left over for the feed side, between the DDGs and the corn oil. So that's because that 70% is basically the starch content. Distillers are a really nice complement to the U.S. exports corn and exports ethanol and exports DDGs. So they are part of the portfolio. From this plant and the Macon plant as well in Missouri, we're at the southern end of the Corn Belt. So our product, we're closer to New Orleans than almost any other ethanol plants in production. So all of our product will go by truck to the river, the Mississippi, and then down by barge to New Orleans. And so that's a big part of where our sales go. We don't rail them out. If we rail them, we lose some of our geographical advantage economically. So for us, it makes the most sense to export out of New Orleans. And we ship 1 to 2 barges per week, generally, out of Missouri to international markets. So those are some of the key aspects of the process. Again, wish you were here to see all this. But again, hope you've learned more about DDGs, particularly with regard to POET DDGs through this presentation.